was just interesting to ask you, really. You moved from making films, independent films, to making ARG, private experiences, and then you set up your own company to do that kind of thing. Is this where you are going to stay, or are you going to carry on making more traditional entertaining content like long format films?
Sure. I mean, I feel like I'm storytelling agnostic in the sense that whatever medium or mediums work best to tell the story, I'll explore. So I'm currently developing a large television property. I'm also developing a larger feature film property. In both cases, there's transmedia that lives and breathes around those projects. But then there are things that I'm doing that might be just kind of urban games, or sometimes just social media kind of experiments or exercises. So for me, it's whatever I can tell a story with, and so very much it's whatever is accessible at the time, or ways that I can use it to either enhance a performance by an actor, use it as a way to R&D various aspects of something that I'm exploring thematically, or in terms of material. So it really just depends.
Did you, in terms of getting involved with this kind of stuff, is it just because lots of other people, it's obvious that people get involved with this, or was there like a culture around where you were working which just naturally seeped into it, or was it just an interest of your own that you were quite focused on technology already as an interest? How did you get involved with it?
Well, I've been making films for probably about 17 years, and in 1996, when I first heard about one of the first prosumer cards you could put into a computer, a friend of mine, Stefan Avalos, and myself made a movie called The Last Broadcast for like $900, and it was all built with like prosumer gear stuff. But then we started to explore with, at the time, there wasn't a term for alternate reality games, and we built out all kinds of website experiences and documentation in and around what it was. So I've been messing around with the form for a while. It just didn't necessarily have a name, or I didn't know what the name was. And then have continually experimented because I have a love of technology, and I really feel that technology can be used creatively, and I think it's an excellent way to connect people, and I think story is a great way to connect people too. So for me, it was very much an opportunity to kind of break some of the shackles that exist in a permission-based culture for film or for storytelling, where you would have to wait for somebody to give you the permission to go and do something. So a lot of the work that I do tends to work at different levels. I have things that are working at very high levels within the system, and things that are working totally independently away from it. But it's something that's been kind of, I've been playing with since probably 1996. So it's definitely an interest and a passion of mine, and I think that there's real opportunities moving forward for exploration. I think we just have scratched the surface on it.
I was going to ask you then, just very quickly, just a little last question. Leading on from that, looking ahead, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years down the line, even 10 years, where do you think, where can you see this developing in terms of, talk about the opportunity in the presentation of the forum, but you must have thought, well, shit, this could happen, that could happen. But where do you see it developing?
Well, I think predictions are always very challenging. If I were to kind of guess, or
where would you like to see it?
Well, where I'd like to see it is I'd like to see it in a way that stories can be, they can travel freely. And I don't mean freely in the sense that they're just always free. I mean freely in the sense that they're not tied to any one particular medium, and that stories can have more of a social relevance to people, and that as authorship changes, they're able to, make some of those stories their own.
So almost customize them,
personalize
their own lives,
customize them, but not in a choose your own adventure way, but more in a way that they become more relevant to their own lives, and they connect people in interesting ways. And I think story connecting people and there being more of a development of a collective, almost like a collective narrative, is really interesting to me. If I look at it and say, where do I think some of the business side will be, I think you'll start to see some really interesting emerging new models that don't rely upon the value of content in the same way, and it'll be more about the social relationships that people have, and that will be the currency that drives both innovation and value in the proposition. And I think you'll start to see more and more connections of niche-oriented size audiences that then rise up and become much larger, and in some cases maybe rival basic cable or pay cable audiences on a global level. So if I look at that, that's exciting. And then hopefully some type of language starts to develop around the crafting of transmedia work. You know, and settling a bit and moving from being like a toddler into, you know, closer to, you know, God forbid, an awkward teenager or something, you know, and maybe that'll happen. So, but I think it's very exciting.
Can I ask you one last question? It's just a very quick question. Cross-media or transmedia? What would you prefer?
Well, I mean, for me, it's transmedia is the term that I use. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's really just storytelling.
Yeah.
You know, the ability to tell stories.
And do you think the terms get in the way a bit?
Yeah,
Sometimes
I think the technology gets in the way. I think the terms get in the way. I think the business gets in the way. Like, I think what's really amazing about it is it's really about story.
Yeah.
You know, and when it's about story, that's when it really resonates.
Yeah.
You know, if the story's good, then people respond to that. Then they're more likely to share it with somebody else. And a lot of those ills that the industries feel will be answered just by going back to storytelling. You know, because I think a lot of things become distractions. You know, like you're distracted by how you're going to raise the funds. Then all of a sudden the gear becomes democratized and crowdfunding emerges and all these new trends happen and people they get stuck in production. I need these tools. I can't do it unless I have this stuff, or I can't do it unless I have this this party's acceptance in some particular way. You know, so
just do it. Tell a story.
Yeah.